She
Give her
was,
my regards, by the way.
I will,
didn't
she
see
was
her name.
best friends with his cousin.
Oh, okay. Wow. Video.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I am Randy Henning. I serve as the faculty chair of the International Economic Relations Program. And in Dean Shannon Hayter's absence, right, it's my privilege to welcome you to the beautiful SIS atrium for our special event, Global Trade, the Global Commons, and Geopolitics. I'll offer an opening observation, introduce our two speakers, and then turn it over to them for the conversation. Now, this event is organized by the School of International Services International Economic Relations Program as a celebration of the inauguration this academic year of its two new master's degrees. Right? These degrees combine study in international trade and finance, political economy, and research methods to place students in international organizations similar to the World Trade Organization, in government agencies, and the private sector. The second of these two degrees is a STEM degree, of which I'm particularly proud for its innovations. This particular event is the first of what we foresee as an annual series on global economic governance. Our guest speakers, as you know, are WTO Director General, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, and University President Sylvia Burwell. President Burwell is the 15th president of American University and the first woman to serve in this role. Prior to AU, President Burwell held two cabinet positions in U.S. government, Secretary of Health and Human Services and Director of the Office of Management and Budget. She also held leadership positions in the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Walmart Foundation, the two of the largest foundations in the world. President Burwell has led the university over the last 6 years, including through a historic pandemic, and started the $500 million Change Can't Wait capital campaign to fund new efforts to support students, including a brand new student thriving center at the heart of campus and AU's comprehensive strategy, Changemakers for a Changing World. She has overseen a more than doubling of research funding from external organizations, and under her leadership, AU became the first urban university in the United States to achieve carbon neutrality and launch the first anti-racist research and policy center. Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala became Director General of the WTO in March of 2021. In college, Dr. Ngozi graduated magna cum laude from Harvard with a degree in economics and earned a PhD in regional economics and development at MIT. She then had a 25-year career at the World Bank as a development economist, rising to the #2 position of managing director operations. Right? She served twice as Nigeria's finance minister, the first woman in that role, steering the country through trade and macroeconomic reform, as well as a debt restructuring and extensive institutional reorganization. She briefly acted as foreign minister in 2006. In 2012, she was the first woman and African candidate to contest the presidency of the World Bank Group, the first genuinely contested transition for that position. Dr. Ngozi has been chair of the board of Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, and the African Union Special Envoy to mobilize international financial support for the fight against COVID-19. She currently co-chairs the Global Commission on the Economy and Climate with Nicholas Stern and Paul Pullman. She chairs the board of the Nelson Mandela Institution and is a trustee of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Among her many contributions, it must be mentioned that she donated her chief economist, Bob Koopman, right, to the International Economic Relations Program as our newest faculty member. So Bob has organized this event along with me, and I'm grateful to him. Please join me in welcoming President Burwell and Dr. Ngozi to this conversation.
Randy, thank you. Thank you, Professor Henning. And thanks everybody for coming out this morning. It's a very busy week for Ngozi this week. And so we're so thankful and grateful that you are here today. We're going to take a trip around the world today. I think it's fair to say this morning here in our beautiful atrium, we're going to take a trip around the world, and we're going to take a trip around the world with someone whose breadth and depth in these issues is really, I think it's fair to say, unparalleled. So it's going to be a real treat. We're going to have time for questions. I'll watch the clock and make sure that we have time for your all's questions. So be thinking about that as we're going through and having a little bit of a dialogue. I had the privilege of meeting Ngozi the first time, I think, when I was when I was at the Gates Foundation, the early 2000s. I was working on increasing agricultural productivity for smallholder farmers, as well as all the health issues that we were working on at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and had the opportunity to meet you then. And then, it was every issue we worked on, not just agriculture, anything we were working on as a foundation. And working in and on the continent of Africa. You were incredible counsel and help. And then our paths have crossed many times since then. I'm privileged, and it's an incredible opportunity today. I do want to mention that we know you have over 20 honorary degrees from fabulous universities around the world, but your last visit here to this campus was last spring, when we know you were given what you probably think is your most important honorary degree from American University. So we are thrilled that you have come back, and so appreciative. And going to start with actually the reason that you're here this morning. And so you're here for the spring meetings of the World Bank, which most of the people that are here would probably be familiar that that's going on. And I just wanted to start with, you're here at these World Bank meetings. What are the three most important objectives that, from where you sit now and the leadership role you have, both in WTO, but in the world economic system? What are the three objectives that you have for these meetings?
Well, thank you, Sylvia. And let me say what a delight it is. I really do feel part of American University.
We love
every day or every other week, Bob sends me some email or the other to remind me. And it was such a lovely ceremony for the honorary degree. So I feel part of this. I feel like I'm with family. And thank you again for having me, Sylvia. And your path has been absolutely amazing. So it's nice to be able to chat with you this morning. You asked me for the three main objectives of coming here. I came for the spring meeting, but every time I come to Washington, I also take the opportunity to check in with USTR if I can, and sometimes with Congress if they're in session. I was there 2 weeks ago because Congress is not in session now. So I came 2 weeks early and did my round there and now. So my first objective was to accomplish something which is rather incredible. Yesterday, the United States deposited its instrument of acceptance of the Fisheries Subsidies Agreement, the first agreement on environmental sustainability ever negotiated at the WTO.
Big. This is big. Very big.
Just a quick word, that agreement had been negotiated to do away with $22 billion in harmful subsidies that are encouraging overfishing of our oceans and destroying ocean health. And it's been being negotiated for more than 2 decades. We finally got it over the finish line last June at our 12th ministerial. And now my objective is to actually get it implementation on. We need 2/3 of members to ratify. And my objective is to get it all done by next February, to have the United States come early on in the game one of the largest fishing economies, sends a huge signal. So we accomplished that yesterday. And I'm grateful to USTR and Ambassador Tai. I think that the second objective, you know that parallel or during the IMF World Bank meetings, you also have a meeting of the G20 finance ministers. So both those are going on in parallel. And during this time of very tense geopolitical, during these geopolitical tensions that you referred to, Sylvia, which are not getting better. On the Hill last week, I really felt like the China-US tensions are quite difficult and may not be getting better anytime soon. One of my objectives is to remind the G20 finance ministers and all the other finance ministers and central bank governors that are here that there are two important things we need to remember. One, we hope that these geopolitical tensions will not manifest in fragmentation of world trade. We hear a lot about decoupling the different trading blocks, French shoring and so on, and some of that may happen. But we need balance, because if the world fragments into trading blocks, the welfare losses to both developed and developing countries, but in particular, developing countries, is huge. So having that conversation that we need to keep in mind that fragmentation will be costly to the world economy. We shouldn't throw away the baby with the bathwater. We shouldn't forget that trade integration has helped the world to achieve great poverty reduction, improvement in living standards. And we know it didn't do everything, that it has some issues. Some people were left behind, but we need to fix that, not throw away the system. So that's a very important objective that I'd like to put across with these finance ministers. We've actually modeled that, so has the IMF. And we've shown that, you know, it would cost the world from the WTO standpoint, if we decoupled into two blocks, 5% loss in global GDP in the longer term. That is huge. I think my third objective is, through what I have to say, is to remind everybody that the multilateral trading system is a global public good. I've termed it that. It's a global public good. And we need multilateralism to solve some problems. So even as we have these geopolitical tensions, even as we have strategic competition, we must remember that we also need strategic cooperation to solve climate change and all the other issues of the global commons. So those are the three things I'm really trying to achieve. One is already achieved, two pending.
Thank you so much. And we're going to go into those a little more. But before we do that, we kind of started with the present. I'm going to go back a little bit to your childhood in Nigeria. And can you talk a little bit about how your childhood in Nigeria impacts what you do today?
Well, thank you. I think my childhood, I was very, very fortunate to be brought up by first my grandmother until I was 8+, almost 9, because my parents were studying abroad and they were on scholarship in Germany. And so they couldn't take me. They didn't have enough money. So they left me with my grandmother, who was a loving and very disciplined person. But she was also about community and learning that life is not about yourself, but about how you serve your community was very important. And learning skills very early in life. You know, I learned how to cook by the time I was 8 years old, and to make sure that I helped with the house, and I went to the farm and the stream. I think all those things have influenced who I am. My parents came back and both of them became university academics, by the way. And I think that continuation of the theme of service, education is not about yourself. It's about what you can use it to do for others. Really continued with my parents, and in particular, my father, who thought, you know, his daughters in particular could do and should do everything. And my 5 brothers too. So that has led me into a career of service, both nationally and internationally, and into the WTO. Because for me, the question I always ask myself in any assignment is, how is it going to help others? If it will serve others and make a difference, then I'm in. If it will not, then I'm not excited about it.
That is great, and I hope that is inspiring to all of our students who are here and to our faculty and staff and the whole community. Thank you, because that is what, as we think about this School of International Service, we're not a School of International Relations, we're a School of International Service because we deeply believe what you just said in terms of why do you do it. And the incredible thing is that, in terms of assignments, you get assigned to anything and everything because of the breadth. This gets to the breadth and the depth of your talent and skills. So you can help and serve in so many ways and have. And that I'm going to kind of go from childhood to being finance minister in Nigeria. And when you were in finance minister of the country, and that's when we first met, at that time, Nigeria sometimes was known for some challenges around issues of corruption, challenges around the issues of having natural resources and what that means in terms of both the country's economy as well as issues of equity in the country. Those were issues that you were dealing with then. Those issues seem to be corruption, other resource issues seem to have spread around the world, including some might even say right here at home. So as you think about how you worked on those issues then, what lessons would you give our students and all of us in terms of thinking about those issues and working on them, whether it's in your own home country or internationally in a global setting?
Well, thank you. That's a very challenging question. But when you think about those issues, the word reform comes into your mind. Because in order to solve these issues, you have to reform certain institutions, you have to change certain policies and the way business is done. And the biggest thing that you need to focus on is when you reform and you make change, there are winners and there are losers. And if you don't bear that in mind, you'll get into trouble. So you've got to think through the reforms you're doing and ask yourself, who are the winners? Because you have to, if they are very difficult reforms, make sure that the winners understand they're winners and that they actually back the reforms. Because the losers are going to be very loud and they're going to do things that maybe, trying their best to upset those reforms. So that's one lesson I learned, not just to go into it blind. So you're in the School of Foreign Service, winners and losers is very important. And sometimes you may not be able to you may try to coax the losers to believe that ultimately they'll win, which is the case. It's not that they're going to lose in the long term, but if they are making money off of something and they're going to lose in the short term, they fight. So you need to coax them that this reform ultimately will benefit everybody and the interest is in it. But it's difficult. So that's why I say don't forget the winners, because they will be the ones who will back you. And there may be silent people there who don't understand whether they're winners or losers. Communicating the reforms and why they are important and what it is going to do to change the trajectory for the country and for people individually. Never forget what you're doing is about people, because you got to explain to those people why they must go through a bit of tough time in order to get to the good time. So that is the big challenge that I think applies everywhere. We're in very difficult times now. We're in times when in country after country, you find tremendous polarization. A lot of populism, protectionism is creeping in. And it is unprecedented in my view, what we are seeing now. So we've got to find means, if you're a policymaker, of trying to explain to people polarized as it is, that whatever you're trying to do, it's for the benefit of all. It's not for one party or the other, one segment of the population or the other. Second, you've got to find out those people who have been left behind. And remember, I referred to the fact that as far as trade is concerned, globalization, the multilateral trading system left some people behind, poor people in rich countries, poor countries. You have to find a way to be inclusive of them now. Because if you do not include them and you don't explain that you are trying to be inclusive, you continue to have those sentiments which divide. And that doesn't help any country or any economy.
Thank you. And that answer you just gave and one of your objectives about communicating as trade as a global public good, bring that together in the next question, which, I've had the chance, I worked on NAFTA back in the Clinton years in terms of trade agreements, worked on, of course, the accession of China to the WTO. I worked and spent time on that issue. I worked with my colleague Michael Froman on the TPP, which was the agreement we got. We just couldn't get it through the Congress. But all of that and that evolution and what you're talking about the polarization, I think, especially in the area of trade, here in the US, trade has become even more controversial than the times and periods that I worked on it. And you were talking about that, communicating about as a public good. And do you believe that there's still a consensus in the US that market opening and multilateralism and trade, are the way to go? And how do you think about where we are in terms of that? I know you were talking a little bit about some of the solutions, the communications and those sorts of things, and we can spend some more time. But do you think we're at a place where it's no longer a dominant view, and so we've got to maybe think differently about how we communicate, think differently about these pieces and parts?
I absolutely do. I think after talking to people on the Hill, to Congress people, and I'm very grateful to them because in spite of, perhaps these views that trade may not be the best, liberalizing open trading system may not be to the interests of the country, they still listened and were exchanged. But by far and away, that's not the consensus anymore. I feel like that consensus is gone. There are people are very focused, some of them focused in on domestic issues and not really out internationally. And I think there's a beautiful article about this by Alan Wolf, who used to be, and his colleagues at the Peterson Institute, a very nice article. And he used to be a deputy director general at the WTO, but the Peterson Institute does some really nice work and analysis on some of these issues. And they really did lay it out. That consensus is no longer there. But the issue is, this is the throwing out of the baby with the bathwater that I was talking about. If the multilateral trading system did not exist, if the WTO did not exist, the opportunity cost of not having it would be so huge, you would have to reinvent it. Maybe people say reinvent it slightly differently, I don't know. But you need the multilateral trading system. And I want to back up and say two things. First, some of the numbers. The geopolitics is tough, the tensions are high, but I just want to remind people that as at now, 75% of world trade still takes place on most favored nation terms, on WTO terms, on still those terms that were negotiated long ago. So the world trading system is still operating on that basis now. Two, world trade numbers are at an all-time high. We have $31 trillion in world trade that is going on, and 25 trillion in goods, 7 trillion in services. So the numbers are saying that maybe the rhetoric is a little bit ahead of the actual numbers. Now, does that, and I can say that for US-China trade, the Commerce Department released figures for last year, 690 billion. So in value terms, that's as high as the pre-pandemic peak that we saw. The same with the EU, about $900 billion in EU-China trade. So I'm just giving you these numbers to say that the rhetoric is a little bit ahead of the actual numbers. But does that mean we should be sanguine? The answer is no. Yes, numbers are showing that consumers and businesses are still pursuing trade within the world trading system. But these trade numbers are based on investments that were made before. And my fear is that the rhetoric might lead us and to switching investments in such a way that we move towards that fragmentation that I talked about. So, and we see trade slowing, the growth is slowing. And beneath some of those numbers I quoted, you can see changes in patterns for certain sectors between the US and China. Trade is changing and is diminishing in those sectors. So we need to look through the numbers in order to understand that there may be worrying, we're seeing worrying signs, okay? We're seeing worrying signs in trade. So that is what I think we should focus on and say, how do we get the balance? How do we get those who are worried that there are unfair practices? And this comes to the China issue. The reason the rhetoric against and the tension is high, at least on the trade side, is the feeling that some members, and say China, may be pursuing practices in subsidizing their enterprises that may go against the level playing field that the WTO supports. And if you talk to China, China will tell you that they're also concerned that some other types of subsidies, including agricultural subsidies, may be also going against the level playing field, and some of the countries in the West are doing that. So what is WTO members, especially the large countries and the developing countries too, all have complaints about level playing field issues. This is fueling some of the suspicion and the aggravation and the talk against trade. So let me end by saying, look, let us not let our sentiments run away with the actual facts. We are working now to lay out the facts on subsidies across the board. From the WTO, we've joined with the World Bank and the IMF and the OECD, all these international organizations, to look at this issue and try to get the facts on the table so that we can begin a conversation that can actually lead us to do away with these suspicions and try and restore the balance in terms of how the trade is being seen and perceived.
Thank you. And this will be my last question. So if folks can start thinking about, we've got mics over here and mics over here if you all have questions. And so this will be my last, and then we'll turn to the audience for your all's questions. You just talked about, getting the facts and helping people understand the facts, which there are some issues with whether that kind of still works. But let's just for now assume that it does in terms of a way to make progress. And one of the issues that we haven't touched on is, in this divide that's occurred in our country, where we've moved to a place where this idea of multilateralism and trade is no longer a sort of majority feeling. We have from the right and the left joining together in their opposition to issues of trade sometimes. One of the things that gets confused in here is the impact of technology. So many people who, as you said, there were haves and have-nots, and in some of the agreements, some groups of people weren't included as much. And that may be different socioeconomic levels here in our own country or countries around the world. And so, but part of the impact is technology as much as it is trade. And can you speak about how you, as you're trying to help people understand trade as a global public good, how do you integrate this technology point in terms of getting people to understand, helping people understand some of the facts around some of the difficulties and changes are more related to technology than they are to actually trade?
Thank you so much. That is such an important factor. that is often not recognized, and trade is unfairly blamed sometimes for things which it's not really responsible for. Technology and technological change, which is going on at pace. If you look at certain industries, let's take coal mining, for example, and you go to West Virginia, many of the changes there where people are out of jobs, it's not really about any trade, it's about technology in that field and the changes and the fact that perhaps the US may not be spending or paying as much attention to active labor market policies that that it should be doing. It should be spending more. I think some of the Scandinavian countries spend up to 1% or 2% of GDP on these issues. What do I mean? I mean, trying to make sure that those who are thrown out of jobs are retrained, reskilled, bringing back some other types of jobs to the areas where they're in, because, economic theory are supposed to migrate to where the jobs are, but sometimes people do not because they have cultural ties. So can you bring jobs, new jobs where they are? Can you reskill? Can you spend the kind of, I think the US spends much less than 1% of GDP. I don't have the exact number on active labor market policies and social policies designed to retrain and re-prepare people, much less than other countries do. So if you combine that, then people begin to feel, oh, it's because my job is being taken away. Am I saying that some manufacturing jobs were not taken away as a result of competition? The answer is I'm not saying that. But you're absolutely right that some of the technological changes in industry is often ignored. I'll tell you a second thing that is ignored: the amount of consumer welfare of cheaper goods coming in, and the fact that poor people have access to these less expensive goods is often forgotten. I mean, if you were to walk into Walmart or to Kmart or any of these stores that have these lovely cotton things. I love cotton. You can find at very reasonable prices and other household goods. These are all because of the integration of trade and the supply chains that we have going over. So we mustn't forget that. If we reshore everything, we also expose ourselves to risks. Look at what happened with the baby formula issue here. When you reshore all supply chains and there's an event, there's a risk. And you may have to open up. How was it solved? It was solved by opening up and allowing supplies to come from elsewhere. So look, trade, I want to just end this question by saying trade is a tool for managing resilience and risk. And this is why ultimately I'm still grateful to people on the Hill, because in spite of maybe being skeptical, I think there's a realization that this is the case, and they listened when I was trying to explain what and communicate. Ultimately, the question is, let us try to reform those aspects that don't work. We don't throw away the baby with the bathwater. You need trade. You need trade. 1 in 5 calories consumed in the world is traded. If you don't have trade, people are going to go hungry. Just think about that.
Everybody, let's think about that. And do we have any questions? If we do, can folks kind of get over to the microphones so we can do these questions? Thank you so much. And we've got 2 microphones. I can go back and forth, microphone to microphone. Why don't we start over here? If you could please introduce yourself and tell folks your affiliation with AU, friend, community member, school, student, faculty, staff, whatever. Love to hear that before you ask your question.
Thank you, President Burwell. Thank you, Director General Ngozi. My name is Patty Dalai. I teach at the law school, and I've been teaching WTO law for the past 26 years. We actually have had a program at the WTO since 2011 on rulemaking and dispute settlement, and we had a 3-year hiatus, but we are restarting it this summer. So we will be coming to WTO and WIPO. I wanted to
World Intellectual Property Organization,
Yes,
WIPO, just
yes.
translating for.
Sorry,
No.
We are into acronyms in trade, I guess. One thing that I wanted to talk to you about is how if the WTO, your statement, if the WTO didn't exist, we would have to recreate it. And as a lawyer, I think there's a lot that the WTO does that only the WTO can do that is not easily translatable for the world to understand. And since in the last 50 years, we have seen the rise of the administrative state, there's the work that is done in sort of bringing together regulatory convergence at the WTO. Even we saw it with the pandemic, being the depository of the laws and the restrictions. Even right now, the pandemic accord, a lot of people are saying it should actually be in WTO, not at WHO. I am very keen for that to be understood and that role to be strengthened, because it's not in the general conversations about trade. It's WTO is more than just, it's an actual convener of regulators, and the regulator mentality is different than a trade negotiator. And these two are converging in the WTO. Regulators tend to be more territorial and negotiators they're bargaining. So it's, for me, I'm interested in helping and working. And as somebody who's interested in world peace and, building a better future for all of us, the role of the WTO, I think, is key. But communicating that and strengthening that role of the WTO, I'm just thinking about what your thoughts are. Sorry to be long-winded.
Yeah. Well, very quickly, because I know there are a lot of people waiting. Absolutely well stated. There are things that go on at the WTO that are not as well known. Standard setting is critical. And we have committees. I think we're the only place in the world where you have members who can come together to actually discuss differences in standards and how we harmonize those for products and goods and services. And people don't know this. So just in short, there's a lot of work, technical barriers to trade, having a place where members can come and talk about what are the other things impeding trade that the world ordinary person may not be thinking about. These are things that are going on at the WTO that people don't know. So thank you. We're trying to communicate better. I'll just end your question by saying the one thing we are trying to communicate is that, look, people don't even understand the purpose of the WTO, especially younger people who really think, wow, this organization may be anti-people. Written in the preamble of the document that created the WTO, it says that the purpose is to enhance living standards, help create employment, and support sustainable development. That is the reason why I wanted to go to the WTO. There could be nothing more noble than that. And how we got away from communicating that the WTO is about people and does so many other things is one of the challenges that I have to reverse this image. Thank you.
So we're going to take, let's take two questions. Let's go this side and then we'll come back to this side and let's do two at once.
Okay. I'm Amy Porges. I'm a visitor here. I'm from Tradeland in Washington and used to work in the GATT Secretariat. So my question is about gender. What can trade policy do for gender? It's an important question because we see, for instance, in Afghanistan, the economy is collapsing because they've sent all their women home and taken away their jobs. And yet in so many countries, you say trade will, the rising tide lifts all boats, but the boats that are owned by women they're small and they have leaks. The boats that are owned by men, they float higher, they're bigger. So what can trade policy do for gender, since gender is so often a domestic policy?
Well, thank you very much. This is one of my passions at the WTO, and actually I have the gender advisor in my office here with me. Maybe Nicole, you can stand up. So I am so keen on seeing how trade can empower women. Because we found out through research jointly done by the WTO and the World Bank that women who are in businesses that export generally earn twice as much as those who sell domestically. So what if we could, and you know that in many countries, it's SMEs that create jobs. A lot of SMEs are owned by women, at least in my part of the world, but everywhere actually. So the issue is, how can we help get more women and enterprises onto regional and global value chains, because that will improve their earnings. And I've seen the WTO and the World International Trade Center intervene on supply side issues. So it's not just agreements, but we have the ability to help get women access to markets, improve the quality of their products, help them understand the technical standards they have to meet to break into certain markets, explain to them how to get access to trade finance. And this is what we have to do, and we're trying to increase our ability to do that at the WTO, including with ITC, offshoot, the International Trade Center. So we are working night and day actively. We have 129 members who are carrying on a dialogue on women in trade as we speak, with a view of trying to see whether we can make better rules and a better environment for women in trade.
Just hit on all the issues. When I was at Walmart, I worked on the women's economic empowerment there. We sought to source $1 billion from women-owned businesses. All of the things you said were the critical path issues that we had to knock down in order to get there. And it is the women sell the companies, the financing issues, it's all of those issues. But when you do that, and when you're actually a business, women creating products, who does all the purchasing? You actually create a virtual cycle when you do it and tap into the things that are working. That is exactly, and partnering with the private sector to get it done, because that's where those women's businesses can all grow.
And Sylvia, digital trade, just to mention, the digital economy is liberating women and making it more possible for them to get onto these value chains.
That is exactly how we did it even that many years ago, because the women could do it. We did it online. We did sales from around the world online. That is, it's an incredible part of how to get this work done. Next question.
Hello, thank you. Can you hear me? All right. Thank you for coming to speak to us today. I really appreciate it. My question is in regards to the United States call for reform to the WTO appeals bench. I picked this story up. I'm also a U.S. foreign policy grad student and an intern at the American Academy of Diplomacy. And I picked up the story back in January about the U.S. wanting to reform the appeals bench. My question is, has there been any progress on that issue, and also do you feel that that there can be some areas to reform within that process?
The answer is a very good question. One of the biggest reform challenges facing the WTO is to reform the dispute settlement system, which has been partially, not all of it, the first panel level is working, partially paralyzed by the, during the Trump administration. It blocked the re-election of new appellate judges because the US had criticisms of the system, some of them valid. Now, the issue is that has been trailing for a while, but now there's progress. And I want to commend the US because, the USTR has been carrying on some informal dialogue and discussions with other members to find out what they think. And it's important to do that because developing countries also have issues. It's not only the US that has issues with the system. We've actually moved to a second phase where there's a facilitator that is now leading these discussions. And the hope is that eventually they will lead to a place where we have proposals for text and then eventually negotiations. There's a deadline to reform the dispute settlement system by 2024, which was agreed to by trade ministers in June. So we're seeing some progress, and it's one of the deliverables we have for the 13th ministerial in February of next year.
Thank you very much.
Next.
Hello, I'm Cameron Allen. I'm a first-year master's student at SIS. My question is, what goals do you have for the WTO to bring trade governance and climate governance cooperation together, especially considering the different challenges for developed and developing countries?
So people view trade and the WTO as part of the problem for climate change because of the logistics of trade. I mean, the shipping industry contributes about 7% of global carbon emissions. Aviation maybe 3%, numbers like that. So people often think of that, but they don't think of trade and the WTO as part of the solution. And it squarely is. So when I think about it and what role do I see the WTO playing and trade, I tell people that we cannot get to net zero by 2050 without trade and the WTO. Two quick reasons why. Just think about how diffusion of technology works. Green technology. How does it get from one place to the other? You know, how do you get economies of scale in its use? How do developing countries get access? How does it happen? It's through trade. So if you didn't have trade, you couldn't get these technologies from where they are made to where they are used. And you couldn't get this diffused. So it would set us back. So, you know, go and think about it. Trade is an adaptation and a mitigation tool then. Adaptation tool, when you have a climate event, how do you recover? How do you get the goods and services you need to recover? It's through trade. So trade is a huge part of the solution. And I think that another thing we could do is also to see how we can lower the costs of some environmental goods and services that could be critical to getting to net zero by having an environmental goods and services agreement negotiated at the WTO with a modest set of goods. There was an attempt to do this. It was just shelved in 2016 because the goods were too many and then it seemed to be benefiting certain countries more. We can step back with a limited set of goods and start that exercise. I think that would be a contribution. I could go on and on. There's so many ways, and it's so exciting to think about how trade and the WTO can be part of net zero.
Thank you. I think we have time for maybe one more, maybe another, but we'll see.
Hello, do you hear me? Okay,
Well, Sylvia, can I suggest something? Maybe we take all the questions and then I try.
Yes, let's take them all. We're going to take them all quickly. If everybody can, we're going to do these last 6 questions. Why don't we do the 3 over here, the 3 over here, and then we will answer those and wrap up.
Hi, good morning. My name is Lekhana. I'm from Cambodia. So I'm the fellow at the Humphrey Public School at the University of Minnesota. I'm the country manager of organization called Support Her Enterprise. So we work a lot with small and medium women-led business to scale up into formal economy. So you have been discussing a lot about the genders, how women can access to the thread. So my question also related into it, probably you already had answer, but I just want to touching it. So I want to know about what are the supporting system from the WTO to help small women-led business from the developing country to access the global market.
Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Lucas. I'm an international student from Chile, and I'm an undergrad. And my question is, in a lot of my classes, like we talk about, especially with like political economy, about like sometimes like with like coins and like exchange rates. Sometimes like it's about like India, for instance, like wanted to like do more rupees recently, or like the BRICS trying to try a new currency, or like Brazil and Argentina. So my main question is, when you hear like the stories like from your perspective, like how does that create some worries for you, like for trade? And if so, if it takes the next step forward and like they become more of like a thing, then what are like the main consequences or the main concerns you may have? Or is it just, or do you think it's just natural part of trade?
Sorry, when I hear the story.
Right, so like
the question, I missed something. You said when I hear these stories.
No, like when you hear like the reports of, for instance, like India like trying to trade more in rupees, or BRICS trying to start like a new currency.
Okay.
Then like how does what are your thoughts on all that?
Thank you.
Dr. Okonjo-Iweala, it is a blessing to be here with you. My name is James Laddie Williams. When I was in graduate school at Princeton, in one of my classes, our professor, Jennifer Widener, made us write for our final and a review of your book, Reforming the Unreformable. So when I knew I was coming to this function, I went and dug through nearly 6 years of email archive to find that essay. So I've printed a copy for you, And I'm going to give it to you to honor you and thank you for your example. Because to have had the chance to learn about how to change Nigeria from a Nigerian at a place like Princeton is a moment I would cherish for my life. Now to my question. I recently got engaged to my partner, and I also know that I have a future in Nigeria's public service. My question is, how do you hold it together? How do you be distinctive in the president's cabinet and be a distinctive partner at home and parent? Because I need those lessons. I'm thinking about marriage now, and I'm thinking about public service in my future. I need the tactics to make sure that I succeed in the federal government and that I succeed in my family.
Great question. We're going to go over here. That's terrific. Here, hand us the paper and we're going to go over here and take this question. Thank you. That's wonderful.
Hi, I'm Doug Palmer with Politico, and my question has to do with the appellate body. Just basically, what's your sense of the membership in terms of what sort of solution you think that they could support? There's this perception that the US just wants to do away with the appellate body and maybe replace it with some sort of voluntary system that would be used on a case-by-case basis, but there would be no standing appellate body. Do you think that's something the membership could get on board with?
Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here, ma'am. My question is regarding one particular group of commodities, which raw materials actually, which has become indispensable in modern day technology, called the rare earth elements. It's used like they are used all the way from mobile phones to the lasers. And when we are talking about geocommons, its geographical distribution is very skewed in favor of very few countries. So is there any debate, dialogue, or deliberation going on in WTO to regulate more equitable distribution of the rare earth elements?
Thank you. Thank you. And we'll take this last question.
Hello, Madam Director. It's wonderful to hear from you. I'm Jean Meyer. I'm a AU alumna. I am concerned about issues relating to developing countries. And one of those is Indonesia recently brought a case. Well, no, Indonesia did not bring the case. The EU brought the case against Indonesia to the World Trade Organization. And the case was ruled for the European Union, and Indonesia is appealing it. The case, I think, relates to Indonesia wanting to hold on to its nickel, process its nickel in country, and create EV batteries there, so that they can climb up the chain supply to a higher value rather than exporting cheap and then importing expensive, which is, I think, a big problem for many developing countries. Goes back to Mahatma Gandhi in India. My second part of the question is more of a hypothetical. I know there's a researcher in Europe that's looked at this, and we have this inelastic commodity that we all want to get off of, oil. But there's a cartel that has a lot of influence on the price of that oil. And there's an agreement that that commodity is bought in US dollars. And I think that is a very difficult kind of handicap for many developing countries. They have to get the dollars and then they have to deal with wherever the price goes. What would happen if a group of developing countries came to the World Trade Organization and brought a case against the OPEC cartel?
Okay. I said we'd travel around the world, and we certainly are.
Wow, what a group of questions. Oh, very interesting. Yeah. Very quickly on the issue from our Cambodian colleague on support systems for women. I spoke a bit about that. There are two ways we want to help women. One is to see how within our agreements, we can mainstream gender-friendly agreements that take into account the role of women. And we have actually a new plurilateral called the Services Domestic Regulation, trying to do away with bureaucracy in the services trade. And that's the first one where we've put in a provision making sure that women will have equal opportunity. And we would like to see more. We don't have enough. but that's one way. But on the support system, these are supply side issues. What can we do practically to help women cross those barriers that Sylvia and I spoke about? And the International Trade Center, which is 50% owned by the WTO and 50% by UNCTAD, actually does that work. And I have to tell you what I saw them do in my own country with a group of women, which I had didn't know before I became Director General for Trade. They worked with a group of women shea butter producers who were trying to break into the American and European market, but could not because they didn't meet the quality standards for sanitary and phytosanitary issues, SPS. And the ITC and WTO, we also have a fund, the Standards Development Fund. We worked with them to get them over some years, to get them to those standards. And the pride I have is that today their product is being exported into Europe from where they were bad, and it's being used in Italy to make a beautiful cream. I actually used to carry a tube with me of this cream. So it's that kind of intervention that we try, and we have to do more. It requires resources, but we can do those things. On Chile, this is a hot topic on the issue of trying to get away from trading the dollar, or use of the dollar as the prime currency in the world, and introduce other currencies. It will take a lot of doing because the dollar is so deeply ingrained as the international currency of reference. However, you see countries, as you said, beginning to make agreements with each other to trade in local currency. You see some regional agreements or regional groupings in Asia, ASEAN, for instance. You see direct agreements between countries. It could be India and Russia. It could be China, trade in yuan, for instance. So it is beginning to happen. And I think it will increase as we go along. The reason I say this is talking to policymakers who sense that maybe, trading in the dollar, it can become also, I don't know what word to use, like a punitive, there can be punishments levied. And so you see countries thinking of how do we move away from total dependence on this into other currencies. So it's at a nascent stage. It will take a lot of doing, but I do see thinking going in that direction.
It's related also to the issue of if the US defaults and we can't pay our debts, this will accelerate this change. It will be one of the things, and it will be one of the arguments as to why you shouldn't default, is because it will accelerate the changes that are starting.
So there are pressures that are emerging. And I think the US needs to balance this, because being the reserve currency of the world is a huge privilege and a huge thing. Okay, thank you I'm going to read your essay. I always say that there you are, Mr. Lade Williams. Whenever, I didn't know if your book gets recommended to be reviewed in a class, then you know that maybe you've done something. I didn't know that. That was a difficult and interesting book to write. So your question is about life. How do you hold it together? How do you balance your family and your work? And it's good to get it asked by a man, not a woman. Typically, when I'm in places, it's always the women who are saying, how do I? So that shows that you know that you have to be a 50-50 person with your partner. And that's how you come back. There's no perfect answer. And I want to quote Jacinda Ardern in my most recent book on women and leadership. We interviewed her, Julia Gillard and myself. We co-authored the book. And we asked her this question as one of the few, or only 2 women in the world to have a baby in office. We asked her, how do you balance? This is a question many women have. And she says, I don't balance. I just make it work. So there's no perfect answer, or we could have cloned it and sold it and patented it. But what I do have to tell you is this. first for your work, your private life, you need a partner who understands that what you do matters, and you understand that what she or he does matters, and you both support each other and both share equally. That's the only way it's going to work. And you need a conversation about that. I often tell young people getting married who ask, I say, people go in thinking, I'm going to change this person and they're going to do this way. No, have a conversation before you get into that marriage about what you care about and they care about, and have an understanding. It's not, and that will help. On getting it together with work, you're Nigerian. And this is one of the most interesting countries in the world. It's one of the most difficult, probably chaotic in many ways, but it's also one of the most interesting. And I always say to people, whenever I step into my country, I get so excited about it. So you will have to understand one thing. People are not going to say, oh, many people come from the diaspora, think there are people waiting to welcome them with open arms and crown them for coming back. No, just know they're not going to do that. They're going to say, this person went to the US for years, now expects to come back and tell me what to do. So you have to be humble. You have to show you know what's happening on the ground and be well-grounded, but have some principles. Principles of operation, because there'll be many pressures and temptations, and have the courage of your convictions.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, quickly, Doug asked about the sense of the other members. Where's Doug? Hi, Doug. The sense of the membership. It's going to be quite a tough conversation, Doug. That's what I'm sensing. What I sense from the other members is that they still want a two-tier system. Now, let me step back and say that some of the criticisms made by the US, I think, are valid, and we need to recognize that. There's no reason why they, say the appellate body should take more than the 90 days to give rulings that was originally mandated, and it goes into years. That may be because cases are getting more complicated and sophisticated, but we can do something about this. Overreach, yes, maybe we need to look at some of that. So there are some valid criticisms. Other members have it too. Developing countries feel the system is not easy to access, but there's a strong desire amongst most of the membership for a two-tier system. Now, does that two-tier system mean it's necessarily the appellate body recreated the way it was before? I'm not sure. Can there be ways to have a two-tier system that is somewhat different and more creative? Maybe. I sense more openness now to discussing that on all sides than I did before. I think a few months ago, members would say the appellate body, and some are still saying that. But I sense now more openness to discussing other ways. Whether it will be what you said, an ad hoc, I don't know. It's going to be a very tough conversation, but we need to go there. On the rare earths, actually, the WTO, it's a very good question, because this is all the rage now. And there's a concentration either where the rare earths are found in a few countries or where they are processed. And so China does a lot of processing, as well as it also has a lot of these rare earths. But a study done at the WTO, look at some of the numbers, shows that the concentration, at least from the point of view of China, is diminishing. I think with these rare earths being so much in demand, more and more countries are exploring, more places are finding that they do have some of these rare earths. Even Sweden recently, I think there was found that they have some. Chile, of course, DRC. Now, any regulation of that, I'm not sure the WTO is the right body for that. We can monitor the concentration of where these things are and how that is changing over time, and share that information with our members, because that helps to release and reduce tension amongst members, that certain members are cornering the market. We will do that, but a regulation is really, I'm not sure this is part of what we are cut out to do. The EU case, this is the last one. EU case against Indonesia. I can't really comment on cases. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to dodge it, but I'm not allowed to. But on your issue about oil and the cartel, can they bring a case at the WTO? I'm trying to see how you could formulate that case and whether the WTO is the right place to do that. This is an issue of competition. I'll have to reflect on it. I don't have an answer for you, but I don't know the shape and against which agreement we would have to judge this. It's a cartel, so you can say it's anti-competitive and maybe this is the reason to bring the case, but I just don't know. I just don't know on this one. A case against OPEC by a developing country. That would be interesting. That would be interesting.
Well, a huge thank you to you. Join me in thanking our guests. Ngozi, thank you so much. Thank you. I'm going to ask Professor Henning to come up as you and I step right beside that picture because we have a special thing to do and I know we want to get you out on time, but you and I are going to walk right off the stage, right over here to this special cover thing. And Professor Henning, I'll ask you to come up. We're going to go off and go right here. Okay. Because you and I are we're going to unveil a portrait that will be hung right here in SIS.
Right. So this photo will go on the wall of fame here at SIS. And we look forward, Dr. Ngozi, to continuing this conversation with you at a future time. We'll have other events here in the SIS atrium on global governance in the future. But for now, I will close the session and ask you to acknowledge Dr. Ngozi and President Burwell one more time with a round of applause.